It's important to me that any of my friends who may be watching this, that whatever kind of day you've had or whatever interesting thing you did today, I bet that you have not spoken with someone who bled through their face by that. I've bursted some blood vessels chunking over a toilet from partying too hard. I've never done it by back squat.
It'd be a good team effort. You should totally come down there.
Oh man, now I'm in.
They have a 50-miler or a 5K. They have a fun run.
They have a color run, actually.
How many coaches do you have?
I think we are at 23 right now.
Y'all probably have the strongest boardroom in the country. So if you hear some barking and a gunshot, ignore the gunshot.
Plausible deniability.
That word moderation is such a bitch. She said, I want to know what that guy eats for breakfast.
Breakfast is, what is it, about a cup of oats and fresh blueberries.
Well, crap. I was sure you were going to tell me, man, I eat like 14 eggs and a pound of bacon. And then tomorrow when I got up doing the same thing, I would tell my wife, I'm trying to be more like Alex Viada. I'm Wilson. I'm here with Vaughn, and we're doing our Lift Heavy, Run Long podcast, and we are super fortunate today to have Alex Viada of Complete Human Performance and author of The Hybrid Athlete. Alex, thanks for taking the time to be with us today.
No, guys, thanks very much. Really happy to be on the show, so looking forward to it.
You basically epitomize what it means to lift heavy, run long, and when I say you epitomize it, wow. From what I've seen on the internet and the research that I've done on you, you're quite the athlete, quite impressive.
I appreciate it. I am continuously finding new ways to find new sports that I'm extremely bad at, and it's kind of been a fun journey of being humbled by what people can do, but it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
Well, humility seems to surround your name, and I think that's refreshing to hear. The people that interview you, they compliment you on your humility and what a humble guy you are. And for such a athlete, I don't know that you see or hear that very often.
Well, it's funny because I think the more sports I've done, I think the more respect I've gotten for what people are capable of and what humans are capable of doing. And, it's funny because over the years, I think a lot of us get very involved in one sport, one extreme or the other, and think that epitomizes, human performance and human toughness and everything else. And you start branching out and you find new passions and new obsessions and new things to try your hand at. And I think the more I've been exposed to, the more I realize just how good and how amazing people are.
Going back in your life as far back as we can, where did you get started? Have you always been an athlete? When you were young, were you an athlete, or it seems like there's clearly not a great deal of people who lift heavy, run long, and are into the variety of sports that you're into. How did this all come about?
Honestly, it came about. It started in high school. My family grew up overseas. We moved a lot. Every country you go to has different sports that are big. I played soccer growing up. I rode horses, did karate, did Muay Thai, played football, played tennis, swimming, track. I think actually a lot of that moving around and kind of adjusting to what each school and each country had available for athletics was a big part of it. It kind of gave me a little bit of athletic ADD, finding that doing multiple things was fun. And, that's what I got a challenge out of, was moving to a new country, finding a new sport, trying my hand in it, and, building proficiency and building a new skill. And, kind of going through the end of high school, that was really what moved me. And, I had better luck with some sports than others. I was fairly good at track. I was fairly terrible at football. I never had any skill in basketball. So, it was it's been a lifelong process, and I think actually I give a lot of credit to my parents for just throwing me into whatever I wanted to and supporting it growing up, and that's really where it all started.
Well, it sounds like that you don't have a problem with trying new things, and that being the best at those things doesn't engulf you and keep you from taking that leap and giving it a shot.
Yeah, it's funny because the more things I try, every now and then, and I've noticed this with a lot of our athletes too, you find things you never thought you'd be good at, and you'd never know. If you didn't branch out, you'd never know. It's funny. I talk to guys like, I don't know if you're familiar with Pete Rubish, but he used to be an ultra runner, or used to run very long distances, and you look at him now. He got away from running. I guess he got into powerlifting just for the heck of it, and the guy deadlifts over 800 pounds. He's not an ultra runner anymore, but this is a guy who thought he had a lot of skill in one area, and it wasn't until he tried something new that he found out he was even more gifted in another area. So, I think no matter how good you think you are at something, unless, of course, you're one of the best in the world, you never know what else it is that, you should try your hand at and what you could possibly excel at.
Well, you poked around to find your niche. When did it come to you that being a personal trainer or being a leader in fitness was something that you wanted to try your hand?
I worked in corporate America for a long time. I worked in pharma. I did a little bit of consulting. I never really considered coaching health fitness as anything more than a serious interest of mine, since I was, almost lifelong, but really seriously since I was about 21 years old. I really started getting into it, I think, when I realized that I had learned so much, and this was the stuff I read on my own. This is the stuff I did kind of as my passion. I wouldn't sit there reading industry journals on pharmaceuticals or anything along those lines. I would sit around and try to kind of build my knowledge in this area. And just given my background in, a little bit of research in biology, biochemistry, reading studies, interest in biomechanics, long injury history that educated me pretty thoroughly. I realized that this is something where I definitively felt like I had enough education and had enough good mentors that I could give back.
Was there a moment of clarity, a jumping off point where you said, I'm going to stop what I'm doing every day in the corporate world and I'm going to stick my neck out there and give this a whirl?
Yeah, there was 2012, first or second quarter 2012, without going into some of the details, had some creative differences with my boss. And realized that, I think I was never going to be able to build something I wanted to. So I left my position there and started this company, Complete Human Performance. And the first month I made $40. And that was a, serious pucker factor moment there. But decided that this was something viable. There was enough interest, even just locally. There were people around here I'd run with, I'd lifted with, and everything else. And there was interest. I said, well, this is definitively an area that people are interested in. And I think the more the message gets out there, the more I can kind of give back what I've been taught. I think the more it's going to grow, and it's kind of gone from there.
And tell me a little bit about Complete Human Performance. Do you act as a personal trainer, or are you just about people going to the thresholds of their capabilities all the way around in strength and endurance?
Yeah, we started out working with two groups of athletes with disabilities, and this whole hybrid concept, which is obviously strength and endurance combined. We're an online coaching company primarily. A lot of our coaches have facilities that they work in, either as gym managers or trainers and the like. But our model is essentially doing online programming and nutrition. And I think we've had 1,200 athletes at this point come through. We currently work with about 350 actively. And and this is why it's easy to stay humble, the way we work is we have a collection of coaches, over 20 at this point, each of whom is really, really good in a particular sport, like an expert. They've been doing this lifelong, or it's an area they're very tenured in. And we all kind of share our ideas from the different ends of the spectrum and combine our knowledge and try to bring the best ultra runners and the best power lifters and everybody else, and bring them together and have them share and exchange what they feel is really important. And by creating this kind of coaching think tank, we do programming for everyone from specialists to people who want to do everything at once. And it's every day I think I'm reminded, even by my own coaching team, how much I have to learn and how far I have to go in certain areas. So it's easy to stay humble when I've got coworkers and peers like that, and even athletes like that who are training for things that I personally might not have even considered doing.
What kind of athlete do you have for the most part? I mean, do you have people all over the place doing all sorts of things, or do you have one majority people that just want to run long races or something like that?
Ooh, we got a real variety. I was even just commenting last weekend. We had top level, pretty much world record holding powerlifter competing in a meet. We had a guy run the Keltman triathlon, if you've heard of it. It's just completely insane. We've got, there's no one profile, and that's what makes it so much fun. It's funny because I think about the whole, lift heavy, run long concept and just how much fun it is. Mm-hmm. And I think the average athlete we have is somebody who just wants to push themselves and try new things and have fun with it. And that knows no boundaries when it comes to sports and athletics. There's no one profile that fits. We do have a lot of military guys, who obviously want to seek that combination. But I would say the biggest single population we have is just people who do. They like trying new things. They like athletics. They like challenges. They like pushing themselves and seeing what they can do. So as far as what they actually do, totally runs the gamut.
I like the sound of that. I take a lot of comfort in that I'm an extremely shitty runner and I am a fairly shitty lifter. And I enjoy doing both of those things, and I enjoy doing them for long periods of time.
Yeah.
So it's nice to get out and kind of see what I can do. And if I spend much time comparing it to what other people can do, I would stay in a constant state of depression.
Yep. And it's funny because, I got into all this endurance work long before I knew that I was supposed to be bad at it. And I think that's what really got me through it all, Well,
that's funny.
I just went out and started doing it and, got my butt completely whooped by runners and, I'd go lift and, had other lifters around me. I was better than some and some were better than me. And, it was there was sort of ignorance is bliss.
Yeah, it really is. And I mean, that's where our whole concept came from is me just being in a gym training and lifting. And I decided just to go run a race, and like I'm standing at the starting line of like a 50K race, going, I wonder if there's anybody else here that can deadlift 400 pounds.
Exactly.
And like, it's probably not.
Yep, exactly. And the thing is, like, that's just a thought in the back of your head at that moment where you're like, oh, yeah, I bet I can outbench these guys. But,
right.
There's no ego associated with it. It's just fun. You're like, wow, this is cool, These are new people. They like new things. They have a different athletic history. They have different training priorities. Hey, this is kind of cool. Let's do this.
Well, I think it's kind of like grasping at straws. It allows me to stay in the game. If I can be at a running event and say, well, I bet these guys can't deadlift as much as I can, and then go out there and run an extremely crappy run, and then go to a weightlifting event and not be able to lift the kind of weights that those people can and say, well, I bet they can't run 50 miles. I'm constantly looking for that window to jump through.
Well, and it's funny, too, because I realize, though, no matter how good you get at anything, that's never going to go away. That feeling of, man, everyone around here is better than I am. And I see it all the time with people, even at the top of their games. You're talking about people who are head and shoulders above even the average athlete, and all they look to is look at the people above them and say, man, I'm never going to be as good as they are. And that feeling never, ever goes away. And, that's part of what I like about all this is you say, well, you know what, if you're having a bad day lifting, you're having a bad week lifting, you're having a bad month lifting, you haven't made progress at all, at least you got something something else, some other kind of sport, some other kind of athletics, some other way to push yourself that you can still, take some pride in. And you can still progress in. And, it keeps you from getting stale and it keeps you from dwelling on what you're bad at because you're always getting better at something.
Man, that's exactly what I wanted to hear and exactly what I wanted to talk to you about, because the fear that's within people, myself especially, of failure and not being good enough, and that everybody's kind of looking looking at me like I'm this or that, when the truth is nobody's really concerning themselves with me. They're all worried about themselves. But you, on the other hand, have either by accident or intentionally placed yourself on this pedestal of being, you know, this champion athlete in strength and endurance, and with that comes the haters. And how do you handle that? How do you handle dealing with the haters that come because of you excelling?
You know, I think that's been something that's kind of evolved over time. You know, I mean, at the end of the day, I never did any of this for, you know, pride or fame or anything else. You know, I started running long distances because it was fun and I felt out of shape. And you know, it's so easy to get kind of caught up in the whole, oh, you know, I'm going to prove my haters wrong and blah blah blah. You know, and I think the switch from that came when I started thinking, no, wait a minute, you know, I want to do this, but you know, I want to do all this stuff because A, I enjoy it, and because B, you know, I want to prove my supporters right. You know, I want my family to be proud that, you know, I put in a good effort here, and you know, I want to show my athletes that I coach that, you know, I can work just as hard as they can. And I mean, you know, you look around long enough, there are haters everywhere, and there are, you know, the fact that there are people out there with no public accountability whatsoever, saying negative things about other people. That's, you know, the fact that other people are talking about you and you have no idea who they are it's a little comforting in a way, because you say, well, you know, they're sitting there at home furiously typing away on their computer, raging at somebody that they've never met. And, you know, I'm sure they're feeling like they win plenty of internet points doing that. And meanwhile, you know, you're the one who's off doing something. So it's, you know, it's, I kind of realized that was kind of an unhappy existence on their part. I've never known an accomplished person or a happy person or, you know, a person who's confident and focused on what they're doing to sit around and rip on others, ever. And, you know, I try to surround myself with people who have their own things going on and, you know, who are looking to see what they're doing. And, you know, I think at the end of the day, too, I've never really tried to position myself as any kind of, you know, amazing athlete. I think it's a novelty to people that there are people who do this kind of stuff. But, you know, I also sit back and realize, wow, whatever I do, there are people who do it a lot better. And I think my whole point is to show people that anyone can do this kind of stuff. You don't have to be a tremendously gifted genetic freak or anything else. You just have to try. And I think when a lot of people realize that, oh, wait a minute, yeah, I can do this too, to me, that's the most satisfying thing. You know, and especially as a coach and as somebody who's trying to lead and inspire other people, the goal is to show people what they can do, not what you can do. And, you know, all of that kind of combines. And I think, you know, the nicest thing people say to me is because it is basically like, hey, you know, I actually think someday I'll be able to kick your ass and everything. And I say, oh, that's cool. That's really cool.
Yeah. Well, your attitude and your humility is clearly what drives other people to place you on the pedestal. I mean, people want to see somebody like you succeed because of your approach to it. Because the way that you approach this is the way that I would like to approach most things in my life. You know, I want to see a trail and not be scared to run it. The same way as I want to see a welding stick and not be afraid to use it. Mm-hmm. The same way that, you know, I just want to try new things, and with trying new things, the hardest part for me, and I think a lot of people, is just getting over what other people think about that, or how we perceive other people to think about that. And the best way to dodge the haters is to just not accomplish anything. Not try anything. Just fly under the radar forever.
Yep. Yeah, you know, and people hate a winner. And, you know, I don't mean that in any kind of, like, egotistic way. Do. But, yeah, look at, you know, sports figures or anything else. Everyone's waiting for the inevitable fall from grace for everyone else. And, you know, I think you got to realize no matter what position you're in, the moment you start accomplishing anything, there are going to be people who are just waiting for you to fall down and fall on your face. And you know you're going to fall on your face. You know, the best athletes in the world, or even recreational athletes, you will fall on your face in some cases, absolutely literally. And that's part of the process, is realizing, look, there's going to come some moment where I'm very publicly gonna eat dirt. And that's inevitable. I'm going to have a bad race. I'm going to have a bad season. I'm going to say something dumb, and it's all part of getting over the fact that that's people's reaction to that is going to magnify your own insecurities. It's people's reaction to anything. It's not personal. Unless they know you, unless they know your history, unless they know everything you've been through, they don't know you. They're reacting to their conception of who or what you represent, and that's what they're attacking. And you just kind of got to move on from it and realize that, that even if it's, that you're just going out for your first 5K and you're looking around and you think people are going to judge you for it, chances are they don't care. And even if they do look at you funny, they're not looking at you. They're looking at their concept of what you represent, which means nothing. It means absolutely nothing to you. And you feel like you have a bad race, and you feel like, in some cases people, I'm the out of shape one coming in last, and people are laughing at me. They're not. They don't care if they're caught up in their own little world. Even if they look at you funny, so what? You went out, you did what you wanted to do, and you're living your life and you're having a good time with it. That's what matters. That's what you take back with you. And you go home, you hug your dog, you hug your wife, your kid, your husband, whatever, and everything is right again. And don't take life personally. Don't take athletics personally. Don't take other people's perceptions personally. This is all just good fun. We're all kind of in the same boat here.
I'm with you 100%. It's like they say, I'm not much, but I'm all I think about. So I feel like that people are all paying attention to me, and the truth of the matter is I can't get them to pay attention to me even when I want them to.
Exactly.
If you could only do one of the two, if you had to run or lift, which one would it be?
Wow. Lifting for vanity's sake, running for mental sake. So I would have to say running. As much as I've always been a better lifter than I've been a runner, I've had some success in running here and there, but it's also broken me. Lifting has never broken me. I've had bad races that have made me want to quit running. Different distances. Running has been, for me, it's been so good for my health. It's been so good for my mental state. Going out for, just like I did yesterday, for, an hour just on the trail by myself in the woods is a kind of zen. It's, I'm a kind of hot-strung person. When I was growing up, I, like every kid, had some, anger issues and this and that and the other. And I think running has definitively helped me channel that and help me deal with it. Lifting lets me channel anger and aggression. Running lets me actually manage it. It just lets it wash out of me. And I think that's made me a better person in the last 5 or 6 years, more so than anything else I've done.
Do you have a recommendation? I realize everybody's different, and I'm not asking you to give the Walmart answer and just blanket everything. But as far as running, during the course of a week, the mixture of running and lifting.
Do I have a recommendation as far as what people do?
Yes.
The most important thing is to think, what can you tolerate based on your training history? Somebody who's been a lifelong lifter, they can obviously tolerate a lot more lifting than running. Whatever I tell people to do, obviously it's related to your goals. Obviously it's related to where you want to go. I would say your body can tolerate, and it's much harder to overdo running than it is to overdo lifting. That said, I've never known anybody to overtrain lifting, and I've known a lot of people to overtrain running. So it's how's that for a complete and utter non-answer? I would say for most people, in most cases, your running and cardio time should be roughly equivalent to your lifting time for the average person. For an interested runner, it should be twice the time, and for somebody just trying to stay healthy, it should be half the time. That's generally the split I see with most people. People who are training for, even an Olympic distance try or half Ironman, or, they'll do about 3 to 4 hours of lifting a week if they love lifting, and 7 or 8 hours of running. If they're just trying to stay healthy, you'll see a lot of these, especially some of the strongman guys we work with, who do 4 hours of lifting and training, or, if they're doing strongman events, 6 hours and 7 hours because it takes so long to set up, and, maybe an hour to an hour and a half of running and general conditioning. there's so much flexibility there.
What about rest days? Do you program mandatory rest days during the
For
week?
everybody? Well, for everybody except myself. I always stress the importance of rest days, and I always happen to ignore it. Yeah, I do. I always program at least one rest day. So get off your feet, relax, do the other stuff you have to do, and mentally understand what it's like not to train on a particular day. Find other ways to channel your energy. I think that's important, and I think that's also good practice to have in the bank if, God forbid, something happens and you can't train for a little while. You got to know how to manage your day without having exercise in there sometimes.
I've seen where you've competed in triathlons. Is that when you're most in your element?
I love biking. I love cycling. I sink like a rock in the water. So for me, a triathlon, certainly the couple Ironmans I've done has been, trying not to drown for 2.4 miles, passing a whole bunch of people and totally overcooking it on the bike, and then plodding along in a marathon and trying not to fall on my face. And all those people I passed on the bike pat me on the shoulder and say good ride earlier. But I genuinely I love those events. I love the support. They are not nearly as zen as like an ultra or a long trail run for me, though. Like I said, I love biking, but I kind of like the whole randonneur concept of just going off on your own for 100, 150 miles and enjoying it. So triathlons are fun, but they're a little too high tension for me, I guess. So that would be the best way to describe it.
So you've done 2 Ironman races?
Yep.
And what about ultra marathons?
Done a couple 50Ks, a couple 50 milers. I'm probably doing my first full 100 next year. The Rocky Raccoon. My thing is, I've just got to keep it's a nice fast one, right?
Yeah.
I've just got to keep my feet and legs healthy, because every time I start ramping up my distance, I start having old ankle problems from when I was an idiot when I first started running again. So yeah, that was we'll see how that goes this year.
When is Rocky Raccoon when is that?
It's in the early part of 2017. I think it says February.
Yeah, I was thinking it was in February. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about that one for a long time.
Oh, do it this year, man. We've got
now we got something going.
Oh, yeah, that's it. You got
to do it. We're actually going to have a couple people, a couple of my athletes doing it, maybe 1 or 2 of my other coaches. So we're going to have a whole team down there, and I figure we'll just mock each other relentlessly if we don't actually make the full distance. So it'll be a good team effort. You should totally come down.
Oh man, now I'm in.
Yeah, excellent.
I'll commit.
Excellent. Good. That'll be fun.
Where is this located?
That's down in Texas.
Down in Texas.
They have a 50-miler with that?
Yeah, I think they've got a 50K or a 50
mile. 5K. They have a fun run.
A fun run.
They have a color run, actually.
How much do you focus on your? With Complete Human Performance? Do you do nutrition with that?
We do actually. We do. We have a couple coaches who do nutrition as well. Two who really kind of specialize in it, and a couple others who do nutrition and programming. It's like anything else. They all come from slightly different backgrounds, worked with different populations. One guy, Ollie from the UK, has worked with pro triathletes. One of our guys here, Anthony, he's a PhD professor at Ohio State. He also does bodybuilding nutrition. So it's again, it kind of runs the gamut. We got so many different approaches and so many different types of experience that it's kind of nice because we're not wed to any like nutritional system. We just do what works.
How many coaches do you have?
I think we are at 23 right now is the number. We're potentially adding one more this week. We'll see.
How does it work? Like if I want to sign up for your coaching, how does the whole process work?
Yeah, somebody just submits a form, with a lot of their stats, what they're interested in, and usually if there's obviously a great fit, somebody who wants to do obstacle course racing and ultras, we've got a guy who coaches specifically that. We've got our tri coaches. So if somebody wants to do a triathlon, obviously they come in for that. And each one of our specialty coaches obviously has enough experience with all the other sports just because of our, shared knowledge that they can program for anything. But we also actually put up a lot as kind of a bidding in our private coaching group or just our coaches group, where we'll have a new application come in and we'll put it up and say, hey, here's this athlete who thinks they're kind of best positioned to work with them. And, we'll discuss it. People will talk about their relative comfort, relative expertise. And I think the important thing is even once a coach has been picked or, picks themselves, we really do collaborate on anything. Anytime that there's any kind of issue or, hey, guys, what do you think of this person's potential knee issue? This person is not getting any faster in this distance or they're struggling with their squat. What do you guys think? So the coach really ends up becoming like the main point of contact. So, if you signed up and you said, or anybody said specifically, I've got an ultra I want to train for this year, I want to stay strong. We'll probably keep them with one of our ultra coaches, but if they start, flagging in their strength levels or they say, hey, I've done my race, I want to start peaking for a powerlifting meet, we may switch them over to one of our powerlifting coaches, but everyone still stays, kind of apprised as to what's going on.
Will the coach write a whole program at one time, or is it like interactive? We're gonna do this week, or here's what you're gonna do this month, and then if you have any questions, get back to me. How does that work?
Yeah, we use Training Peaks. I don't know if you guys. A lot of. I guess it started out mostly for cycling and triathlon, but it's one of these programs that's First of all our coaches have access to the exact same account, so each one of us can see all 1,000+ athletes we've ever worked with, including all the active ones, which is great if you ever need a template. But it also it's interactive, and in fact it can be updated day to day. So if I go in there right now, I can write up a program for tomorrow. One of our athletes could just open up their phone, open up the app, look at it, see that workout, put in some feedback or ideas, hit send or hit save. I can open it back up on my computer and see it immediately. So by doing that, each coach kind of has their template for whatever cycle they're running. But if we've got to adjust it, we can easily adjust it. We can easily switch whatever category the athlete is in to, under a different coach if the time comes. So our thing is we try to be kind of as fluid and adaptable as possible, but make it as seamless for the athlete as we can.
Y'all probably have the strongest boardroom in the country. You get all those type A personalities going on their beliefs one way or the other, and I would buy tickets to see all y'all come together.
You know what? We've had some people come through who have been very much like that, and the funny thing is they don't last. They get things in their head. They get obstinate. It's my way or the highway. And with so many different types of athletes, I think they quickly realize that that's not going to work. A lot of, and that's what I love about my team so much. And I can't say enough good things about them. Is they're all so good at what they do, but they're all so open-minded. Just a really, really humble group of people. And we've got world record holders, and they're just kind of like, so I can lift a lot of weight. I don't know anything about running, so teach me. And that whole teach me approach, it's contagious. It starts applying to everything, and you say, wow, here I thought I was really, really good at everything athletic related, and I realize all I can do is pull on a damn bar. I've got a good deadlift. And you quickly learn this entire other world that you know nothing about, and I think it really gives you that good sense of humility to even the stuff you do know. It's hard not to be humble and not to be open-minded when you're surrounded by that much varied expertise.
Yeah, wow, it sounds like a lot of your success kind of comes from understanding that all of it works and none of it does.
Exactly.
On the person and putting forth the effort.
Yeah, exactly. That's probably been kind of one of the biggest lessons. I used to be so absolute about so much stuff, and God bless those people 12, 15 years ago who used to listen to me rant on message boards when I had all the answers. 14 years ago when I knew everything, and oh man, I used to lecture people who've been lifting weights for 30 years, and I was so superior because I had all the answers. And I'm absolutely shocked that those people still speak to me.
Well, the reason that they do is because that's powerful. What you say, it's powerful that you realize that and that you move forward and that's how you get to the position that you are. I like to hear that. There was a time when I knew everything as well, only I couldn't get anybody to listen to me. At least you know that.
I really got to hand it to a lot of those people because, I think, we're all of us, no matter what level of expertise we're at, we're a product of everybody who's seen fit to teach us something. And, everybody who's taken a moment to explain something to me or a moment to show me how to do something, or even just take a couple minutes out of their day to encourage me. That's responsible for every bit of where I am. And I almost don't say that enough. Is I try to give back what they gave me to some extent, because without them, even if there's some of them that I just disagree with, upward, forward, backwards, and everything else, they taught me everything. And it's hard to have an ego about it when you realize that you yourself knew nothing until others came along and kind of put you on the right track.
Do you have a nutritional program that y'all tend to follow more than others? I mean, as far as does y'all stay more towards paleo, or do y'all stay more towards low carb, or how does that work?
Most of our people tend to be much more of kind of the traditional diet. I think a lot of us have lower protein recommendations than you'll see out there. We don't really have a paleo approach. Most of our coaches are pretty much a whole food approach. We try to stay away from anything extreme, though, we've worked with ketogenic diets before, though we don't usually recommend them. We've worked with, athletes who want to do fat adaptation, so we can speak a lot of different languages, but our main one is kind of one of moderation. We try to, again, stay away from the extremes, because I think our system is that we have no system. Our system is that we pull everything that works and bring it all together, and that very much applies for our nutritional approach. It's sane amounts of protein, sane amounts of fat, sane amounts of calories, and sometimes we'll do nutrient timing for carbohydrates, especially for athletes. We work with a lot of people who have, and this is something, I'm sure as you do more and more running, you understand, GI sensitivity is a major thing in a lot of sports. So, a lot of our coaches pride themselves on, understanding different dietary restrictions and food substitutions. But, for the most part, we're pretty agnostic. Again, we kind of do what works, and more specifically, what works for the athlete. We don't tell people to do something that they've tried before they're not going to be compliant in.
Right. That word moderation is such a bitch. I hate hearing it when it comes to food or most anything else for that matter.
You know what it is? Moderation fuels extremism. You cannot be extreme. You cannot excel at anything unless the rest of your life is kind of moderate. More the idea that you've got to have some kind of routine. You got to have some kind of sanity. You've got to have that stable base to let you do great things. If you obsess about everything in life and go from this obsession to that obsession, and everything you do is extreme and high strung and everything else, you're going to burn out. You got to find some consistencies, find some constants, find some moderation and some peace in your life with the easy stuff, so you can really focus on those few things that you really want to excel at.
And have fun doing it.
Yeah, I always come back to that. Have fun. This is all fun.
That's the best thing I'll hear all day, for sure.
I wanted to go back to your training. We touched on this a little while ago when you were talking about rest days, but what do you do for yourself? I mean, do you have a coach yourself, or do you experiment on yourself, or how do you manage that?
I experiment on myself constantly, and some things work, some things don't. Years ago, when I first started running again, I had a track coach, and I learned a lot from her. I've had lifting coaches, I've had mentors, but as it stands right now, I'm, given the last 2 years and how crazy things have been, travel, missing competition days, everything else, I just try to do new things, and I try to get in whatever feels good at the moment. I think I got really burned out about 2 years ago, kind of for things I touched on, feeling like I've got to do this for my persona, and I also think what an egocentric way of thinking that is. Like, everybody else actually cares so much what I do. I mean, they do, but they don't, as I mentioned. It burned me out, and I ran an ultra that I wasn't trained for, and I did a powerlifting meet before my hip was healed, and I just had a bad run of it. So at this point, I'm, just kind of focusing on what seems good at the time, trying to find new ways to combine things. Dabbling with some strongman implements a little bit, learning some new skills there, finding ways to push myself there and get stronger. I'm doing a lot of biking lately, doing some mountain biking. Just a real gamut with stuff, and everything teaches you new skills. And I realized through mountain biking that my bike handling skills were god awful. And, a couple of rounds on some single tracks showed me that pretty quickly. And, I realized from dealing with strongman implements that, dealing with things like the log press, you realize how bad your overhead balance is because it's totally unforgiving. And, that exposed some real weaknesses in my shoulders and upper back and everything else. So my whole thing is kind of, learning what each sport and each new endeavor can kind of teach me and trying to pass that on as much as possible. So that's kind of a little bit of it. I lift 4 days a week. I do some rowing twice a week. I do at least one long ride or one long run. I try to get a trail run in there. I try to do some interval work. A little bit of everything.
I've got to ask you, I was telling a friend of mine at the gym yesterday that you were going to speak with us, and she got so excited. And I said, is there any questions you want me to ask? She said, I want to know what that guy eats for breakfast.
It's funny. I talk about moderation. My breakfast and my lunches are very, very boring, and it's almost the same thing every day, and that's because I love to cook. I love to cook, and I enjoy good beer. So, my breakfast is what is it, about a cup of oats and fresh blueberries and, usually a glass of milk and, maybe some eggs, whole eggs or egg whites, whatever I want. My lunch could be something as simple as a peanut butter sandwich, maybe another glass of milk, just light stuff to get me through the day. I snack pretty regularly on just things like, egg white tortillas and stuff like that. And that's because for dinner, I like having fun with dinner. I cooked, what is it I'm making tonight? I made like lamb ossobuco last night. And, I think tonight I'm going to, probably do something with, wild boar tenderloin or something like that. It's, I love cooking. I love food. I've always loved that. So I try to make most of my diet every day relatively reasonable in terms of calories. A couple meals, they're fixed every day. I know by the time that dinner rolls around, I've taken in at least this many carbohydrates, at least this much fiber, at least this much protein and quality fat. And that way, my dinner, I know I can have a lot of wiggle room. It's that moderation early in the day kind of fuels the extremes of, then having myself a bomber of, 11% good beer and, some crazy, massive roast that I'll make. So it's it all kind of balances out.
Well, crap. I was sure you were going to tell me, man, I eat like 14 eggs when I first wake up and a pound of bacon, and then tomorrow when I got up doing the same thing, I would tell my wife, I'm trying to be more like Alex Viada.
You know what? I would tell you more than anything is keep eating for enjoyment. It's something that's easy to get away from, and I think it's funny because I used to have when my diet was really tight, I used to have real problems with sticking to a diet. But when I finally loosened up these dinners and said, you know what, I'm just going to have what I want. I'm going to make a really good meal. I'm going to have something that's really tasty, and still kind of make reasonable choices. I'll cook a fillet or a tenderloin or sirloin rather than ribeye all the time, though I'll occasionally have a ribeye. And you can kind of, you don't have any cravings. You're eating a good variety of food. I realized I used to get cravings because my diet was so structured that, unbeknownst to me, I had all these probably micronutrient deficiencies and everything else. And you don't have to force feed yourself when that happens either, because you eat good food. You eat flavorful food, and your body adjusts to it. And I think it's so easy then to make it fit into my life. And that's another case where I can go out to nice dinners, and I can go to events and not be worried about it, because again, that moderation and that structure through most of my day and through most of my week gives me the flexibility to do something that's a lot more fun.
What do you tell the guy who comes to you that's fresh off the couch, hadn't done anything since he was in high school, and he's 50 pounds overweight and doesn't have any idea where to start? How do you get started with him?
Ask him what he enjoys. Try to think of something that, try to think of a way, try to find something that he can be good at and that he can learn to be good at. Whether it's, I get a lot of traction with a lot of people doing strongman type stuff, especially people who've just been on the couch, because it's just like, hey, let's just lift some heavy stuff and carry it around. That's fun to people. Or get into trail runs. You got a kid, get a jogging stroller and push that thing around. And for a lot of people, I find that the best compliance comes from find something you think you can progress at, because everyone has their own image of what they are. You've been get a guy who played high school football, who played college ball. He's a big dude. He's always been a big dude. He's not going to want to become a 160-pound runner. It's just not in his mindset. So you say, what can I give this person that kind of reminds them of the good time they used to have playing ball? What can I get this person doing that is kind of consistent enough with who they are and who they've always wanted to be that they're going to keep doing it. So, I always say, find something fun. Don't worry about who's looking at you. Don't worry about any of that kind of stuff. Find something fun, and you will be infinitely better at it than doing what you think you have to do.
Man, that is solid advice. Vaughn and I are always talking about finding your bliss and finding your passion and doing what you love doing. And I think that, if you just go out there and try to find that, and keep it simple. Don't put so much into it. And one of my problems is I'll compare myself to the people around me, and I lose that I'm doing this because I want to enjoy life more, not because I want to add more stress to it. I'm trying to get rid of it. Sometimes I'll come home with more stress than I went in there with.
Yeah. And it's funny, and I think back to when I made the best progress. When I was training for my first Ironman, when I was training the mile, when I was doing all that kind of stuff. There was no social media involved. There was no doing this for other people. I would go out there and run intervals right after my lift, on a dark track, just because it was fun and because I enjoyed doing it, and nobody was telling me I had to do it. If I had even looked people would have told me I probably shouldn't do it. But, I never really paid enough attention to know that I shouldn't. And that's where this all came from. It was just kind of a pursuit of what makes you feel good, and a pursuit of new challenges, and a pursuit of fun. And that's what made it so sustainable for so many years. And, hopefully, if nothing else, I kind of hope that we're conveying to people now, not only can you do all this kind of stuff, but wanting to be good at one thing doesn't mean you have to give up other things that you might love. And that's that's so critical to all this.
I've got to ask you, I know that this probably isn't the direction that you want me to take, but I've got to get some numbers, man. What's your back squat?
Okay, right now, about 4 months ago, I hit an ugly 300 kilo, no belt, no wraps, but right now it's more like about 600 in training, and that's that's no gear, no equipment. I haven't done a competition squat in a long time, but that's kind of right around where I'm hovering. And I love the no equipment lifting, like no belt, no wraps, no knee sleeves, nothing, because man, does that teach you humility when it comes to your story.
What is 300 kilos? What does that come out to?
It's 660. But it obviously was not. There was no side judge looking at depth or anything else. So I'm kind of like, I got a video of it, but that's about it.
600 plus.
Yeah, that's about where that is right now. And every time I go on a trip or take a week or two off, I get because I'm 36 now and everything starts to get creaky. I come back and there's a week or two of trying to get back into it. But yeah, so squat is, around 6, low 6s right now with no equipment. My deadlift is around mid 6s. Bench is right around 4, maybe a little above that. That's those.
And mile time.
Yep.
No clue. No clue. Let's see. I'm doing, because I haven't done any speed work in a long time. I would bet I tried doing a sub 5 the other day, and that was a disastrous experience in 95-degree Carolina wind. I cracked around 0.75 miles in, so I think I ended up with like a 5:24 or something. So it's nowhere near as fast as it was when I was focusing on it, but I'm still pretty pleased at how relatively quick it stayed.
What's the fastest mile you've ever ran?
Fastest I ever did on a track was when I was training specifically for it, and I got down to a 4:32. And that was That was when I was working with a coach, and I desperately wanted to hit 430. I was weighing, I think, about 214, 215 pounds, and I said, I want to hit 430 so I can, basically put some weight back on. And she said, you're going to have to lose some weight. And I didn't listen, and I went from a 432 to a 440 to a 442 and burned out completely.
What weight were you when you were running a 430, 440 mile?
I was, like I said, I was around 214, hovering between like 210 in the morning and 214 in the afternoon. So, and actually, I was always a slightly bigger runner. Like even when I ran track in high school, I was around 170, 174, 175. So I've got very long legs, which makes me a good cyclist, which also made me pretty quick. But yeah, it made me. I was never a very good sprinter though. So there's that.
Yeah, if you've never seen the picture of Alex, there's a picture that you'll find on Google that always seems to come up of Alex on a bike. I think he's not wearing a shirt, but this dude looks like a monster on this bike. Like, I remember the first time I saw it, I was like, holy shit, who is this guy? So if you haven't seen that, you got to go look for it.
Yeah, that's it's funny too because I don't even realize how much, like, especially my body weight has changed through the years and everything else is, I see some pictures when I was like over 240 and I'm sitting on a bike and I look completely ridiculous. I look like I'm gonna eat the handlebars or something.
I don't think ridiculous would be the term I would use. I would certainly like to look like that on a bike. My wife actually asked me last night, what kind of bike do you ride? Somebody of your size, do you have to have a certain bike for that?
It's actually the bike frames themselves have been pretty good. I've never had a problem. I've got a Cannondale Synapse, a 2014 Cannondale Synapse. I had a 2015 Kestrel Talon, which was great. These are all just, pretty regular carbon bikes. The only thing I'm really hard on is components. If you're a bigger rider, expect to replace a lot of chains. You got to be extra smooth with your shifting. And I don't know if you saw the picture, but I actually bent the crank on my Kestrel about a month ago. The big ring just decided it would taco up when I stomped on it during a sprint. I don't know if you saw it. This was a Praxis, cold forged chain ring, and it bent. I didn't know what to do with that. But what I would tell big riders is the frame doesn't much matter. Get yourself good wheels with a good high spoke count, and keep an eye on your components pretty regularly because they're going to go fast.
Well, something else that I read that I'm not sure if it's urban myth or urban legend or if it's true or not. Did you bleed through your face while back squatting?
Yes, I was, and there are probably a lot of, especially geared powerlifters who will kind of nod their heads. I was playing around with lifting gear for a while, single ply squat suits and the like, and it was one rep I did. This was in the gym, and I can even probably find some of the guys who were there. I think it was over 800, and when I got done, I saw a spot of blood on the floor, and so immediately check my nose to see where it's coming from. I checked my eyes, and one of my spotters pointed in my face and said, "I think that's coming from your cheek." And what's funny is I think it actually popped up in my Facebook memories a day or two ago. Just one of my pores just started bleeding, and I guess it's just that systolic pressure increase that comes from heavy weights and then a squat suit, which is compressing your whole body. But I've seen some geared lifters who have just they'll burst capillaries, or their eyes will start bleeding, their heels will start bleeding. It's crazy stuff.
Wow. It's important to me that any of my friends who may be watching this, or any of my associates, that whatever kind of day you've had or whatever interesting thing you did today, I bet that you have not spoken with someone who bled through their face by that. I bursted some blood vessels chucking over a toilet from partying too hard. But, I've never done it by back squat. That's incredible.
Yeah, it's, and like I said, if you've ever seen geared lifting, I don't know if you guys are familiar with it. You see some of these, the bright orange squat suit. You'll see people squatting in and things like that. That stuff is hard on the body. Oh man, I got so much respect for these guys because the amount of weight and the tolerances for messing up are so small. What an absolutely brutal, interesting sport that is, the geared powerlifting. And again, dabbling in it made me realize, wow, these guys are badasses. So something else the opposite side of the spectrum that it gave me a whole new respect for.
Man, that's incredible. Where do you see yourself, and we'll let you go. I know that we told you to ask you for an hour, and you've given us at least that. Where do you see yourself 10 years from now?
That's a good question. I would like to not be broken. If there's one other thing I can tell people, it's if you think you have an injury, you probably do, so don't be an idiot. I would like to keep growing this company that I'm part of. I would like to help this whole movement, this whole mutual respect between athletes, and this whole overall healthier approach to sports and athleticism. I would like to keep that growing. I would like to be doing what I'm doing. I'm busy as heck, but I'm happier than I've ever been. I'd still like to be running. I'd still like to be biking. I'd still like to be lifting. I don't know to what extent. Who knows? But honestly, this is the first time in my life I'd said, I'm pretty happy with where things are going. And that's another way to really test if you're doing the right thing in life. If somebody asks you what you're doing in 10 years, you just look around and you say more of this.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's where everybody wants to be. And what I hear is just that you want to stay active and enjoy, help people stay active and enjoy what you're doing.
Yeah, and that's always been the fun part. And like I said, I love I love what you guys do. I love the way you make everything within reach of people, and you inspire people to push themselves because they know they can do more. And that's I love seeing that. I love seeing that approach out here. I love seeing that kind of camaraderie and people reaching out to each other and other experts and coaches reaching out to each other and saying, hey, we're all kind of in this together. And I love being a part of that. That to me is the most rewarding part of everything.
I need that community, and that's what got me moving it all. And sometimes you think I don't even want to take that first step, because if I take that step, then I'm going to start expecting things from myself, and before too long, people will start expecting things from me, and I just don't know if I can handle it. So you need help, and you need other people to do all of this.
And when people expect things from you, just tell them what they can expect, which is, I'm gonna be a good person. I'm gonna put more effort in than anybody else I know. It's rather than them, don't control your own narrative and say this is what I'm about. I'm about me. I'm about my my knowledge. I'm about I like teaching. I like trying new things. I like being bad at things. And that's what gets people that's what gets people behind you and in your corner, and I'm seeing a lot more of that, and that's really cool.
Well, man, I think you're an incredible guy. I came into this conversation with a lot of respect for you, and I got to tell you, I just got all the respect in the world for you, man. I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us.
Yeah, me too, man. I've been following you for a while, and was really excited to talk to you, and so I really appreciate it. And, man, I'm looking forward to seeing you at Rocky Raccoon.
Yes, absolutely. That's going to be excellent. I'll bring the beer.
All right.
No, guys, and seriously, thank you very much. And, again, thank you guys for doing what you're doing. You're helping to make this whole thing, really cool. And, I pretty much wear your buffs on every run I do at this point. So, I love it. I love it. So thanks for having me on.
All right, man.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Take care, man.
Take it easy, guys.